Welcome back to the Management Diary. This is where we get to have serious conversations on matters career, research, scholarship, and lifestyle. In this conversation today, we are going to discuss the Chevening Scholarship. Of course, this scholarship is coming up, and I have hosted a scholar from the University of Leeds to share with us the experience on how to make an application. So in this conversation, we should expect to get all the necessary information regarding the Chevening essays and the new updates that are there in these essays in this year. You're also going to get information about the Chevening interview and, of course, what you should expect as a scholar on the program. Having our guest, of course, means he has been through the entire experience and is just about to finish his studies. I'm your host, Omar Joseph, and in this podcast, we get to post scholars from different parts of the world and different institutions to discuss various aspects of graduate funding and the other topics that I have mentioned. We have just reached so close to hitting 10,000 subscribers. So I'm thanking you for supporting us. And if you've not subscribed to our channel, please consider subscribing and check us out on LinkedIn. How are you doing?
I'm very well. It's good to be here. First of all, thank you for the incredible work that's been done at the Management Diary. It's really amazing to see the amount of effort that's been put into helping people learn from previous experiences of scholars and, of course, build on their applications in the future. So it's an incredible thing to do, and I'm proud to be here to share a bit of the Chevening Scholarship and also my experiences as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here, considering now you're a scholar and you're about to finish your 1 year tenure. So what is your perspective about Chevening so far before we even start talking about the application process and whole thing?
Well, interesting. So Chevening for me has always been a stepping stone. It recognizes talents, it recognizes leaders, and then invest in those leaders to become, of course, better leaders for their future. You would hear me say investing in leaders, and so that already puts your mind to think Chevening is looking for people who are already doing something in a particular field. It could be in the health or in agriculture or in technology. Chevening doesn't even have a specific department where it focuses on. So it's a global scholarship and welcomes people from across different fields and experiences, especially even people who are, of course, not just in probably just focused on academics, but they're also entrepreneurs or business people. As long as you can show the need for a master's degree in the UK, the Chevening Scholarship can recognize that talent and, of course, invest in you to study for a 1 year master's in the United Kingdom. So it's an incredible opportunity to experience the UK in its diversity and rich culture. And I think everybody should, of course, be able to have that opportunity.
You know, I'm looking at your profile. You went to the University of Calabar in Nigeria, right? And you did a bachelor's degree in food science and technology.
That's right.
Then you went ahead and joined the Lagos Business School, Pan-Atlantic University, and did an MDO. And now you are at Leeds doing a Master's of Science in Food Science and Nutrition. Does it mean that everybody has to follow this path? Or what are the qualification expectations that are there for the funding organization, the Chevening Awards?
Right. So, of course, for me, having to come from a background in food science and technology, and then also I'm decided to do a master's, it's just one of the examples through which you could, of course, get into Chevening, but it's not the only way. So there's no ideal Chevening scholar. I like to say when I'm interacting with some of my mentees, there's no ideal person who is a Chevening scholar. Some people may have studied a different field and they are working in a completely different field. And so, of course, their master's is going to be in field of their interest, right? So Chevening is not saying because you studied a particular field, you must have to do a master's in that field. It's really left to you to prove your credibility and your worth, of course, at the essays and, of course, in the interview. And just literally show, even if you're having a career switch, you should be able to have some convicting experiences at least. So even if you don't have a background, educational background, you should have at least worked in the field, or show some interest through taking online courses or through volunteering in the space. and then deciding to do a master's in the field rather than studying for something and then having a switch without any concrete reason to do that. So I think for me, of course, I had worked within the food industry even after I finished my first degree in food science. And so it just placed me at a good pace to be able to apply and then, of course, gain the scholarship. So it's one of the routes. I won't say it's the easiest route, but it's one of the ways through which you could just go in. It's, of course, by studying and then having a bit of experience before making your application. And as a requirement by Chevening, you must have 2 years of work experience. And I think that's also equivalent to 2,800 hours of work experience. And interestingly, this year, the eligibility has changed. So now you must have 2 years work experience after your graduation. It's no more a cumulative experience from before you started your degree or during your degree and after your degree. It must now be after the degree. And so Chevening is now being more intentional about the quality of experience you've been able to gain after your degree. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same field, but of course, you need to have a bit of experience before you consider getting a master's.
Does it mean that your undergraduate experience is not part of what would be contribute to your 2-year degree? So if I had some experience during my undergraduate, second year, third year, so that does not count anymore.
Yes, anymore, it doesn't count. So from now, I think I was just trying to get access to the place on the website where it had mentioned it. There's been some new changes, and so experience within undergraduate studies will no longer be considered as a valid work experience. It has to be after. So, yeah.
Okay, now let's get into some deep facts and let's get our hands dirty, as we like to say. Chevening is popularly known for its essays. And there are 4 essays. I don't know if they have any extra, but I've come up. But from my understanding, there are 4 essays that one needs to write in the application. You have written these essays before. So we are going to learn from your experience. Sometimes we say this is not the 100% only way this can be done, but it's good to learn from the experience of somebody who has been through the process, right? So in your experience, first, let's begin with what essays are we expected to write as applicants?
Right. So just at the first thing, of course, you want to consider is being prepared to write those essays. And there are 4 essays in total. It is the leadership, the networking, the studying the UK essay, and the career plan essay. Those are 4 different essays, but I like to see them as one story that has been split into 4 different parts. Because it's important to look at it as, of course, there will be one accessor that will be accessing your essays across the 4 parts, and you don't want to have disjointed essays across that. So it has to be one story where you telling your leadership experience, your networking, your studying the UK, and then the career plan. It's a good way to approach it. The first question now is, let me just get to it, sorry. So I'm just reading this off the Chevening website now. Is, do you have strong examples of your leadership and influencing skills? That's the first question now. The second question is, do you have good examples of building professional relationships to achieve positive outcomes? The third question is, how does your career plan address both local and global challenges in alignment with the UK priority areas? And the fourth question is, how will your choosing courses support your ambitions to drive change?
So, the first part, let's discuss the leadership-ism, right? So, what do they expect when they're talking about leadership?
Right. So, leadership essay, of course, some things we need to put into mind is Chevening requires you to be a leader in your field. It doesn't mean that you have to. I think I get this question a lot. Do I need to own an NGO, or do I need to probably be working in a big company before I could, I have strong leadership examples? And the answer is no. So whatever your leadership experiences are, your ability to tell them in a way that aligns with what the UK priority interests are in your country, then that, of course, sets you at a good pace to writing the leadership essay in question. So I may not exactly get the question, but one of the things on the website is that you have to be able to put your strong examples of your leadership and influencing skills together in terms of your ability to, it could be even in working in a team, but showcasing what your own role in that team was. Right. And then also, of course, you need to also show how you're able to influence others to achieve a particular goal. Typically, we should have 500 words for these questions, but based on the new development by Chevening, it's been reduced to 300 words. And so you have to now think in-depthly on how you're able to write 2 essay questions into 300 words. I mean, basically how to write a leadership example into 300 words. So you could either make it into 2 leadership examples, which I think would be fair, rather than having 3 examples that you wouldn't as well write a lot of information on. And again, on writing the leadership example, you want to think about the STAR approach. In fact, across all the 4 essay examples, the situation, the facts, the action, and the result. Another thing to notice is that as much as possible,
Could you tell me more about the STAR approach?
Right. So the STAR approach, the STAR stands for situation, task, action, and result. I like to add an additional L, which is, of course, lessons. And I think this is because the entire leadership example is of no use if you have not learned anything in the process. So it's important for us to also highlight what key lessons you may have learned from the leadership example. So situation, of course, what was the issue, what was the challenge around the solution that you're providing through your leadership example? What was the problem statement, basically the problem statement? And then, of course, the T stands for the task. And that's speaking more into what you needed to be done to solve the problem, right? And then the A is the action now. What did you do to solve the problem in relation to the task to solve the problem? And then finally, the R is the results that were gotten after your initiative, whatever it was that you did, was able to come to limelight. What was the result? In numbers, specific numbers, I was able to reach out to 300 people in this community, in this school. Something I like to say is also the specificity. Be as specific as possible, because these people reading your essays, they probably have never seen you before. It would be interesting to hear, for you to mention the names of the places, the location, where, of the W's, of course, the words, the when, the where, and the how. All that should be clear in your response, all through the situation, the task, action, and the result. So your results shouldn't just be, we were able to reach out to over 100 people. Be very specific. And of course, you don't want to lie, because these people have the way of always getting you. And of course, if you get it past through the essays, you have to defend your responses in an interview. And so it's important.
Yeah, we are coming to the interview shortly. But then I'll take you a step back.
Yeah.
Now, you've told us the shell on how to do it, right? Could you allow us to benefit from what you wrote? So tell us, in your case, what went into your writing, so that at least when I'm thinking about what to put into my essay, I can know exactly this is the kind of things I could put based on what other scholars have done. So what did you write?
Okay, interesting. I could just share a bit of my essays if I can find it, but I don't know if that's something I could do. Okay, so what I did was that I tried to connect what leadership means to my personal experiences. So I started by sharing what leadership means to me, and then I sandwiched it with 2 leadership examples, and then I rounded it up with, of course, Chevening, because that's the whole essence of scholarship. And so if that's the whole essence of the leadership essay that you're writing, And so sometimes I read essays and it just ends abruptly with them talking about their experiences and that was the result and they are done. Next essay. That's a no. So leadership essay, 3 parts based on my perception. The first part, which of course probably the first paragraph, should be an introduction into what leadership means to you. What is leadership to you? And I wouldn't say this is a place for you to quote some previous leadership statements or what leadership is normally, because I mean these things are everywhere, and you don't want your assessor to be reading your essay as the person reads every other person's own. And so if you want your essays, of course, to be unique, to stand out, you have to be very personalized. And so I recommend that you start with having just a message or a definition of what leadership is to you in a bit to just throw more light into what your experiences would talk about. For example, if you say leadership to you is the ability to identify or maybe solve problems, then in your examples, you're showing that you've identified the problem and then you've worked with a team or you put together people to be able to solve that problem. And so that definition, that beginning, more like sets the pace for the rest of the essay, just introduces it, and then 2 essay examples, 2 leadership examples, and then the conclusion. It's important to have the conclusion, of course, that comes back to Chizzy.
So yeah, given that now we have this is just an addition to that statement. Is given that the word count has come down, is somebody needs to think very carefully about how to be clear and concise. Because the first instance used to be 500 words. So you had some plenty of space. If you are listening to this conversation and you think 500 word is a lot, you're probably gonna have to rethink, because that is not a lot. It's very, very, for you to explain something in detail, it's not very much, right? Now they have cut it down to 300. Then it means now you need to even think more carefully on what goes into the essay and what doesn't. So in his view, Victory said, first, I have to say what leadership means to me. Then I tell, based on that, this is what I've done, right? Then you say how useful this is to, you link it to Chevening, right? Am I getting you correctly? Yes. Now, that is the leadership essay. But then we have 3 other essays. One essay is on networking. And of course, you come down to the other 2. How about we discuss the networking essay first? So, what do you think should we be doing when we are discussing about networking?
Sorry, Joseph. Just before I get to the networking essay, if that's fine, one final thing about leadership essay, and just because you were saying the word count has been reduced, and so you might need to give considerations into being more concise, and that's important. So in my case, I used 499 words, and I gave 2 examples. Like I said, you don't necessarily have to follow through exactly the same way. I had some of my friends who are now scholars, they had up to 3 examples within the same 500 words, and they were able to get in. So you don't have to give 2 examples. If you feel 2 examples, it's going to be too voluminous for you to discuss. I think reducing it to 1, reducing the word counts to 300 could give you a liberty to at least do 1 or at maximum 2 examples. Then you have to be really concise. So you don't have to throw in too many words that are loosed. The introduction and of course the conclusion, which should be a bit of what leadership is to you, and then of course the conclusion should be fewer words compared to the main content of your leadership, right? And then the final thing I wanted to add is, remember that you're not just giving loose leadership examples. They have to, in a way, tie to global goals. They have to tie to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. No matter what it is, if you're able to link it into how your actions are helping to, address some global goals, that you're one step in the right direction. And also looking at the UK priority areas in your country, whether you're from Nigeria or Ghana, it's important to understand what the priority areas are and then try to see how your leadership examples are tilting towards solving the problems. And of course, before you start thinking about this essay, you should have already looked at some projects that the UK is doing in your countries. And of course, you can find that by following UK if you're from Nigeria, UK in Nigeria, or from Ghana, UK in Ghana, whatever it is. There's social media handles on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. Most of these projects that the UK is currently doing in respective countries are being discussed there. But then there are also specific websites where you could go ahead and check to see what current projects are ongoing, and then see how your leadership examples can help to address those problems. I mean, it's important because that's the whole essence of Chevening Scholarship. Chevening is not the charity scholarship. It's not for the less privileged, if I put it that way. It's a scholarship that is strategic to build relationships between the UK and your respective countries. And so you position yourself well if your leadership is already tilted in the direction of a particular global goal or a particular priority area for the UK in your country, and that already sets the pace for the rest of your essay. So it's important that I just add that.
Okay, on to the next one.
Yeah. Right. So networking essay, for me, networking essay is one of the most interesting essays to write, because it's the opportunity to just show Chevening how you build connections and how you intend to build connections in the UK. Right. It's a two-part question. From previous years, they're not just looking for what you've done in the past in terms of relationships that you've built in the past, but also how you intend to build relationships in the future. And again, you want to be very specific. You're mentioning names, you're mentioning places, you're mentioning dates, you're mentioning very specific things that people could just read your essays and be able to trace it, because again, they usually do their due diligence in tracing some of the things that have been mentioned in your essays. And so if your essay is not detailed enough for somebody to just pick it up and trace some of the things you're saying, then you might, of course, fall short there. So it's important that you address it at that level. Be very specific. Again, responses has reduced to 300 words. So you have to be more concise now with your response. For me, what I did was that I had an introduction into networking, and then I gave, of course, I had one paragraph for one networking example and then another paragraph for another networking example. Again, two examples I give here, and following the STAR approach. So STAR approach, just like I mentioned for the leadership essay, is very important across all essays, across the 4 essays. And so in the networking essay, you're mentioning not just who you met, but of course, how you met and how you were able to build that connection. Let me just read the essay question from the previous. I think it's really important I do that. It says, Chevening is looking for individuals with strong professional relationship building skills who will engage the Chevening community and influence and lead others in their chosen profession. Please explain how you will build and maintain relationships in professional capacity using clear examples of how you currently do, and outline how you would use these skills in the future. So it's a 2-part question: how you currently network, and of course, how you intend to use it in the future. Right. So just to go in a bit more detail, STAR approach, situation, task, action, result for the 2 examples. And so the same, just like the leadership, you can have a problem statement or an issue that probably made you decide to meet up with someone, or probably you went for an event and then you met up with someone and then you had to build on that relationship to create a new product or to create a solution, or you had to reach out to someone on social media. And I mean, based on that relationship, you were able to carry out a few projects. They just want to see how you're able to connect with people, how you're able to build relationships. Because when you get to the UK, you're going to be attending a lot of events and lots of opportunities. And of course, they need people who can be able to engage meaningfully with those events. And so you want to show through your responses that you are able to do that. You've done that in the past, but you have also produced results from the networks that you've had. So it doesn't matter who you've met. Even if you've met anybody you can think of right now, but if you're not able to show how that network was able to bring results, then it might as well not qualify for a networking example. So you're not just looking for people that you've met, but a story of how those relationships that you've built has been able to lead to solving a problem in your community or wherever in your work. And so it's important to look at it in that perspective. So it doesn't mean that you must have met somebody, big in quotes, but it could be just a simple relationship that you were able to build. And of course, through that, you've been able to achieve XYZ goals in your career. So two examples I would recommend, but with the reduction again of the word counts, which is not typically what I expect. I saw coming, but it's left to you to be more concise in your responses, but still show a very detailed response for each of the examples you provide. And again, you want to round up with Chevening. Again, you don't just want to give random examples and then you just end, abruptly without having to recognize Chevening again. And just like I said, the question also wants to know how you intend to network in the UK. Don't just say you would attend events in the UK. What events are you going to attend in the UK? Specific events, what dates are they going to be holding? And you could say something like, from me as well, I belong to the Institute of Food Science and Technology, and there are lots of events here, inclusive of the Global Food Conference and a few other events that also hold in the UK as well. Your ability to spot it out, and of course, how you intend to build connections from those events, or even through Chevening networking events as well, like the what's it called? The Chevening orientation event. There's Chevening Cooks, Chevening Explores. There's the Best of British. Lots of events that it's currently ongoing. The Chevening Conference. So it's really important to mention those specific things, those specific events, and how you intend to engage with them. For example, if you're mentioning the Chevening Conference, you can also mention probably a research idea that you intend to share at the Chevening Conference.
Where do I get to this event?
It's on the website, Joseph. So the Chevening website houses most of this information. In fact, literally all of it. And so I tell people, spend enough time on the Chevening website. Dissect it, sleep on it, take a lot of time there. And of course, you get as much source that you could add into your essays. It's important to do that. And it just makes your essays different from the rest of the applicants.
All right, I think that is detailed enough. And there I don't know, there are a couple of things that could be done. You can also be creative in terms of, I know I'm doing my PhD, and there are other events that might not be necessarily on the website as well. So to supplement on what's on the website, probably if there's a reputable conference that of course, at a master's level, you can attend most of these reputable conferences, especially here in the UK. So I think that could also go into something you may also want to talk about, because these conferences are really, really a place where you can just to meet people you never expected to meet in your life. Now, before we start,
sorry, as just to add one more thing, if you're having 2 or 3 examples, try to ensure that you're not giving the same kind of examples. So if your first example is meeting somebody at an event, the second example shouldn't be at an event again. It should be something more diverse, probably through social media or through, try to give varied examples, make your application, your essay more interesting to read. Try to give varied examples that just suggest to them that you have various means of connecting people. And then, of course, mention how you intend to network in the UK based on certain events in your field and also Chevening events. Don't just talk about events in your field, talk about Chevening events, because you're coming through Chevening, and it's important that you try to recognize some Chevening events that you are interested in and you look forward to being part of. So
now we have 2 more essays before we can begin to talk about the other parts of the application. So how would you like us to break them down?
This studying the UK essay. Right. So studying the UK essay is another very interesting one. And I think this should actually be one of the easiest to write. Or for me, it was, because it allowed me the opportunity to, beyond reflecting, but to think in the future, how the courses I'm applying to can help me achieve my career goals. So this is not bent on what previous experience you might have had, but of course, what you intend to have. And so it's important to do a lot of research into your courses beyond surface level. That's what helps your application stand out. When there are really interesting things that you're finding out about your field and you're putting them into your application, they're not surface level things you just picked from the website. They're things that you must have done a lot of research into. So Chevening allows you to pick 3 UK institutions and related courses. So of course the courses have to be related across 3 different institutions, and you have to rank them as first choice, second choice, and third choice. And then of course the question is outline why you have selected your 3 UK universities and courses, and explain how this relates to your previous academic or professional experience and your plans for the future. Please do not duplicate the information you have entered in your work experience and education in the form. Okay, yeah. So the keywords you could see here is explain why you've chosen your 3 university courses and how it relates to your academic and professional experience. So, and of course, this is why Chevening is now saying that you must have worked at least 2 years after your graduation before you're able to apply for the Chevening Award. And so Chevening wants to, of course, see how your previous experience, either academic or professional in the workplace, how it's, of course, blends to the master's program that you want to apply. And for this particular essay, I would typically advise for 5 paragraphs, and I'll break it down. The first paragraph should be the introduction. It could be a problem statement that your career plan, your course of study is going to solve. I mean, across your 3 different courses, which of course should be related. So the first paragraph I'm dedicated into probably talking about that problem in detail, but just briefly, of course, because you need to also speak, you need to write more on your courses themselves. So talking about that problem, and then a link on how it relates to your work experience. And then if in your case, it also relates to your undergraduate degrees, it's good to also mention that in the first paragraph. And then just link it to how your studies in the UK would help to address the problem. So of course, you cannot be deciding to study for a master's if you have not identified something that, of course, you intend to contribute to solve it. And so you want to use that first paragraph to talk about that broad problem, not of course in detail, but just briefly, but then show how that links to your previous experience. And then most, of course, to the next paragraph, that's the second paragraph, should now focus on your first choice. So your first choice and the reason why you've chosen it. The next paragraph, of course, your second choice, and then your third choice, and then the conclusion. So introduction, 3 choices, conclusion, 5 paragraphs. And now that they have reduced the word count to 300, you want to be as concise as possible. Every word that you're writing counts. So every single word that is being sorted into your essay should count, because now you have lesser words to write on the essays. I would say for your university choices, try to go very detailed in terms of don't just pick things from the website, but try to look at the course modules. Try to look at, I mean, your reasons for choosing those courses. The course modules, it could be probably an industrial affiliation that your course has with a particular organization. It could be the internship opportunities that are within your course. It could be the staff members that are within your course, a particular one in your field. It could be based on a research paper that you wrote that you saw by one of the professors in your field and you found it interesting, and then that has more explored your interest to study in that school. It could also be more social things, because Chevening is not just looking for people who are very academic. You need to have that balance. I remember even at my interview when I was speaking about my responses, and they said, "Victory, you are really academic. Can you tell us some very social plans that you intend to undergo in the UK?" So yes, it's important if you have some reasons, of course, for choosing your universities. Could be the location of the university, either based in London or wherever it is. I mean, of course, you could say things like, if your university is in Liverpool and then probably you're a Liverpool fan, it's a good thing to say, because it shows them that you're not only interested in, of course, studying, but you look forward to being able to watch a live football match, which I was advised to do so at my interview, right? So it's still something I look forward to doing. So it's important to have that blend, right? So they want to know why you have chosen the courses, but they don't. All your reasons don't have to be academic. Based on what I wrote, based on my 500-word currently with, I had 3 reasons for choosing my first choice, 3 reasons for choosing my second choice, and 3 reasons for choosing my third choice. And of course, I had to be very specific even in mentioning them so that I'm not just being too fluid with my essay. I'm saying, firstly, this is the reason. This is the reason. Secondly, this is it. Thirdly, this is it. It's second choice, my first reason for doing this. I will not even recommend you just using ranking, except you're ranked number 1, probably in the UK. Except it is well noted, you can't be using ranking if you're, I mean, you're now using first 80. I mean, it doesn't make any significant point. So you want to look at, I mean, points that really show the depth and of course the relevance for why you have chosen those courses. So yes, I mean, you have to research deeply. One of the reasons for why I also chose one of my courses, which of course was my third choice, although I didn't eventually go there, was that they were currently the school, which was the, I think it was the I'm trying to, okay, it was a master's in food systems and management at Craigwood University. One of the reasons, of course, why I chose it was because currently the school there of food systems and management was undergoing a research project to enhance rice production in Africa. And so it was, of course, a project that master students could participate in, and it was also sponsored by the UK government. So it was a good reason for me because I had seen the opportunity to, of course, continue this project when I'm, of course, back to Nigeria. So it's important to see that these reasons, you may not just see them on the surface level, but it's necessary for you to do a lot of research into your schools. What are the projects that previous people have done in your schools? And how do you think of course, even if you're not very sure yet, at least you should have a direction as to what you intend to do in your dissertation and all of that, and then see if, I mean, based on your choices, anyone meets your prescription. So it's important. It's important to really do a lot of research into this course.
You see, we have spent around 20 minutes talking about the essays, and I know it is important to talk about it in this much detail because that is one point of communication between. I mean, it is the essay that is going to get somebody into the interview, right? And shortly, we are coming to talk about the interview, but I understand we still have one more essay on career plan. So, what goes into this essay then before we can start deconstructing the other parts of this jobbing application plan?
Right. So for the career plan essay, I wouldn't say it's the most important because all 4 essays are really important. But I would say it's one that really needs to be given a lot of thoughts because it's more like it's more like where the final decision would be made because you can have incredible leadership examples, you can have incredible networking examples, you can have incredible reasons for why you've chosen some UK schools. But then the plans are not adding up. And so it's important again to ensure that that essay is meeting the requirement from, of course, from the side of Chevening as well. 3 things to look at when writing the career plan is that they want to know your career plans immediately after you've returned from your master's program, and then in the midterm, which should roughly be about 5 to 7 years, and then in the long term. And I like to also say you need to have an introduction. And then the next paragraph should be your plans immediate term upon completing your master's degree. And then the next should be in 5 to 7 years. And then the next to the last paragraph should be the long-term plan. And then, of course, the conclusion. So 5 paragraphs, introduction, conclusion. Then, of course, in between 3 different paragraphs, I'm address.
It would be
Immediate plan.
it would be good to link this to whatever you've just said up there. Because I remember you just mentioned that this, you think about this like one long essay, but broken into some parts, right? So,
Yes. So think about it as one essay, one write-up, but just into 4 parts. And so it has to connect.
now when we talk about
Let me just add that, of course, based on the policies of Chevening, you have to return back to your home country after your master's. And so the first part, the second paragraph, which of course should be looking at your plans immediately after you return, should now focus on what you intend to do once you're done with your master's program. What is the plan? How do you intend to leverage the knowledge that you've gained in the master's to create change in your community or in your workplace? And so building on that, of course, it shows them that you have a plan to return, which of course is a major requirement from Chevening to return back to your home country. So I hope that helps.
It's like, we began this conversation upside down, and I will tell you why. Chevening expects that a prospect has identified 3 institutions they want to go to. Has identified 3 courses they want to take for their program, right? Now, selection of this program can be, first, you need to understand how to select the programs. And then after that, because they're going to influence how you're going to write your essays, it's more or less like there is a part where you're going to defend, you study in the UK, you're going to defend why that program or why that institution. Now, we have possibilities. One possibility is you can select a couple of programs in different institutions, or you can select the same institution, different programs. Now, what is your take? But this is your personal take on this.
Well, I would say selecting 3 different universities with similar programs might be a better approach because it allows you to be more varied with the university choices in terms of the placement of those universities, because some people might want to explore universities in London and the north of London, and then in the north of England rather, and then it allows you to be more varied. And it's also important to have 3 different universities in case one university has a requirement that probably you're not able to meet up. You could fall back to the next university. But in the case where you just go with 3 similar courses in one university, you might end up having to get to a point where you're not able to continue with the university because of a requirement that you're not able to meet. And then it just limits your choices. But again, it's my personal opinion, because Chevening allows you to do both. If you intend to have one university with 3 related courses, that's totally fine. You're still within your rights to apply in that route. And also to apply to 3 different universities, 3 different courses, but of course similar courses, where you could be more varied in terms of the location, in terms of the requirements that you're looking at, and then of course balance it out with your reasons for applying to the 3 universities.
Between the scholarship and the universities, which did you apply to first?
Okay, so in my case, I started the university applications first before the scholarship. So the scholarships opened in about August. But then university applications sometimes could open as early as July, and some of course open from August. Some open towards October as well. So it's important to look at your university and then try to see when applications would open, right? So it's important to know that so that you can also keep track of your application. I applied to one of my university, University of Leeds. The application opened much earlier, so I applied to it. Applied to that before I submitted my Chevening application, in fact, right? But then, ideally, you should be able to approach both of them together. While you're filling your application to Chevening, you're also making the application to your school. And of course, it's important to do both together so that you're able to also tell which you can progress with. In case there are some universities that probably there's a requirement again you can't meet, especially if you are looking at a school that requires IELTS, or a school that requires you to reach out to references that would send the references themselves, or you upload the references. And so sometimes that understanding people don't get until it's late, and then they start rushing towards the end. So it's important to know that, of course, schools have different procedures. They open at different times, but Chevening expects you to apply to both simultaneously. When you're applying to the scholarship, you're also applying to university. Well, I would say it's important to start doing your research to the universities early enough so that you know what you're going to fill into your tutoring application. Because you have to fill into your tutoring application the universities you will be applying to. So once you fill them in, then you can go ahead and apply, right? But if you've already done enough research, you can easily just know what to apply for. And then while applying for the scholarship, you also apply to the schools as well.
Let me think like an applicant. I'm seated here and I want to apply for a master's in aeronautical engineering at Cambridge. But this program, it's usually open in December. So it means by the time this program will be open, the Chevening could have already closed the application window. So does it mean that I can't put this program as a potential program? Or what should I do in this context?
Right. So when the application closes, it's not really a concern if you have, I'm sorry, when, of course, when you make your application, even if it opens by December, it's not really a concern if you have already filled in Cambridge as one of your university choices on the Chevening website. So the deadline for you to receive an offer is usually in July. So July of the following year. So you still have the time, even if your school applications will open in December or even in January, you still have till July to be able to provide an unconditional offer. And of course, Chevening usually makes it clear. I think it's July 11th or so, if I'm not mistaken. I need to check that. But then it's important to just get your offer early enough so that when you're successful, you can, of course, progress with the scholarship with your unconditional offer. But if you eventually get the scholarship and then you don't have an offer, unfortunately, there's nothing you can do. That, of course, that offer from the Chevening would have to be withdrawn and given to the next available person. So that's why it's important that you apply to schools early. And that's why it is also advisable to at least look at varied schools, because now, if you just went for one school and then you couldn't get an offer in all three of the universities from one school, then it limits your choices and you cannot fall back to any other one. So at that stage, it's important to also understand that Chevening needs you to have filled the application form with the schools, but you don't need to submit the offers at that time until in July. Yeah.
I think that is well covered. Now,
Yeah.
Victory, I know this is this question sometimes can can be a lot, but I'm trying to look at things from the applicant point of view. You see, one of the big challenges when a person is making an application is references. And sometimes we say references can actually, you can do all the work properly, but then choosing the wrong referee can become a disaster. And that is more or less, in as much as it is possible you are within control, it can also go beyond your control, right? Now, at what stage do one submit references when making application of Chevening? And as you answer that question, who do you think would serve as an ideal referee? And what does this whole reference process entail?
Right. So first of all, I would say the Chevening website has a guideline for applicants to send to their referees. It's important that you send it to them because it also shows them a breakdown of what Chevening requires the referees to write. And so if you're, of course, you should already know your referees, ahead of time, and then send it to them and then get them to write the referral based on that. On the people who can qualify, ideally, of course, if you're able to get somebody who works, either your line manager or people who work within your company who have been able to, I think, know you. I think the requirement is for about 2 years and above or so. I'm not exactly sure when to confirm that. But again, of course, friends are not allowed to write. Friends or family or relations are not allowed to write references. So it has to be. Chevening requires 2 references, by the way. So it's a professional reference, which of course can be from your workplace, and then an academic reference. If you have graduated, I think within the last 5 years, you're able to get an academic reference, and you should. So academic reference and professional reference. Yes, of course. So, like I said, you should send the guide to the referee and like get them to write that and send it. However, I think so. That's why I say it's important to follow through on the website because the methods may have changed in terms of. I think in my time, I had to upload the references myself. They didn't need to send it, but I think it's important to also check the developments within Chevening. It might require that the references themselves send it to an email address, but I'm not certain. I think also it was possible to bring your references to the interview if you are privileged to be invited for an interview. That's the last point at which you can submit your references. But I mean, ideally, you should be able to be that much before your interview. I mean, if you know that you're making your application, you should start making the arrangements for the references as well. So it's something that has gotten people into a lot of issues again because the wrong reference can mar you. So references are really important, really important. Even in my interview, my lead panelist said she read a reference from my, of course, one of my colleagues, senior colleagues at work, and it was good because he was able to point out some specific things based on what I had sent to him from Chevering's website that had the detail for referees. And so it's important to do that. Send them the guide and then let them understand what Chevering wants. It has to be very detailed and not just one line or the basic stuff. It has to be very detailed. So yeah.
When was the first time you heard from Chevening after submitting your application?
So when you submit your application, usually when it closes in about November, I think this year it closes earlier, but in my time it closed about November. And the next time, so if you don't meet the eligibility before December or before the end of December, you would have gotten an email from Chevening that you have not met the eligibility. Right. And then by January, of course, they would start sending rejections coming in January, and then by February, in, invitations to interview, yes, coming in February, and of course interviews run till about April or May, sometimes, yeah. And then of course by June, you get final outcome, either successful or reserve or unsuccessful. So that's the last bit. That's the bit where you now have to submit your unconditional offer from your university. So it's a journey. It's a long journey, and I think it's a journey that I mean people. I like to say that you don't have to. It's not compulsory that if you don't get it the first time, it's the end of the world. I mean, it gets really competitive, and so some people have to do it. I mean, the first time and then learn from the experience and go again. But of course, by June, if you're selected and you have an unconditional offer, then you're right to go. If you're on reserve, then accept there's a rejection from someone who has been selected, or opportunities come because I mean sometimes more funds become available and then more reserve candidates are being brought in. And then of course, if you're unsuccessful, you might have to of course try again by the next year. So that's just how the job.
Talk to me about your interview. So, you received an email from Chevening telling you, congratulations, now we are inviting you for an interview. What are you thinking at this time?
Yeah, Joseph, it was really overwhelming for me. It was my first time applying, by the way. It was my first application to Chevening. Although I had known about Chevening since 2019, I had just had it at the back of my mind, and I was going to put in my application. And I mean, I did finally in 2024, or 2023, and I started in 2024. So it was really something that I mean, I didn't even know how I felt at the time I got my response. The final response in June, it was such a big news for me, such very big news for me, and of course for all my colleagues as well. It was one that I had always hoped and prayed for, and so in Cape, it was like finally, final joy that I have been looking forward to because it's quite a long journey, it's quite a long wait, right? From when you submit your application in November and then up to June, it's about 7 months wait. It's a journey or two, and so it's a privilege that I think you should be able to fight for. So even if you don't get it the first time, you should still. I mean, I've studied. I'm rounding up my masters now, so I can really, indeed, speak on the generousness of the scholarships. Really incredible and it's life changing. Yeah, so it's pretty much
This interview experience. Now you have your invitation to the interview, then you go ahead, you prepare. Now you present yourself for the interview. I want to understand exactly what goes on in the interview. So,
right.
what was this whole experience like? Like from as much as you can remember.
Right. So, yeah, my interview was quite interesting. It was very not so long. I think it lasted for about 25 minutes or so, and I think four people obviously on the panel. Okay, no, three people were on my panel, which included somebody from the FCDO, and then one person from the Chevening alumni community, and then also I had the Chevening programs officer on my team. But again, it differs. Sometimes, ideally, you would have one person who is in your field, and then you have a Chevening alumni, and then a person from the FCDO, and then we also have somebody from the British Council in your country as well. So it's usually four people, but then in some cases there are three. But you cannot predict how many people will be at your interview. And some interviews are also being online, but it's usually mostly on-site interviews. So yeah, it's one that of course you have to be very prepared for because they're going to have your essays printed in front of you. So your essays would be printed in front of them. They would have already made some marks on them, and definitely they're going to ask you questions based on what you've written. The whole idea is it's not to rule you out, but it's to just see if your experience, what you've written in your essays match the person that they see in front of them. And so it's important to come with that, of course, with that confidence to prove your credibility. If you wrote your essays yourself, it shouldn't be an issue because they'll just want you to build on the experiences that you've shared in your essays and how you can, of course, align them to studying in the UK. It's usually a very, for most people who have not had interviews before, it's usually a very tense scenario, but they've tried to make you as calm as possible. They offer you water. In some cases, they even offer you, in fact, some of my friends would be, they even offer them snacks as well. So, in fact, they would even stand up and welcome you and ask you to sit down. So they will try to make you as comfortable as you can. And of course, before they start interrogating or just basically conversing with you. So it's a good experience, but it's one that I would usually advise to just be yourself as natural as you can in your own self. But of course, you have to be professional again, even in your dressing and otherwise.
So what exactly they ask you?
So the first question, of course, icebreaker question. Tell us about yourself, and I think I was asked, tell us about yourself and why Chevening. That was the first question. It was more like an icebreaker question. Tell us about yourself and why Chevening. And then they asked me about my leadership example. I may not remember it off my mind now. My leadership example, I think they asked me to tell them about a time where I led in a team and I was able to influence others towards solving a particular problem. So yes, and then of course, so basically the questions are going to be based off your essays. They're going to have your essays in front of them. And I could also see that they have highlighted some points, and that's where they were asking me questions from. So ideally, it would also be from your leadership and networking, career, studying the UK, and of course your career plan. So all four parts of it would definitely be asked. So I was asked one question I studied in the UK, but it was what skills do you intend to gain from your master's program in the UK? So it's not typically what you may have talked about in your essays, but of course, they want you to be able to think to be able to provide the skills. It may not just be academic skills, but what skills, of course, do you intend to gain from your master's course in the UK? It could be networking skills, and of course, how you intend to do that. So it's important to pay attention to the questions. They would usually give you a book and a pen, a paper and pen to write. So in case you need to write out the questions they ask you, or just write down the keywords and then collate your points and then speak. But you don't want to wait too long, of course. Once they ask you questions, you don't want to wait for too long before you start responding. You want to, of course, be as responsive as possible, but there's no need for a rush. In fact, they would gladly repeat the question over and over and simplify it if that's what you need. It's just there's no rush on their end. They are there to, of course, help you get in. You just need to prove yourself.
Yeah, I think for somebody who will get as far into the application stage as possible, I hope they will remember to come back to this point of the conversation and get those facts right. And when I was applying to master's scholarships, I was looking for one thing called prestigious scholarship. And when we speak about prestige, Chevening is among the top scholarships. It's not just about the money that comes with it. I understand the Chevening network is broad and you're going to meet a lot of leaders. That is not for this conversation, but there's one final aspect I'd like us to have a chat about. When we say Chevening is fully funded, what exactly do we mean?
Interesting. So the fully funded as in fully funded. So you don't have to spend a naira to come to the UK to study. Chevening is that generous, from your flight to your visa fees, your health fees, immigration such as fees, your stipends. Of course, you'll be receiving stipends in the UK. There's also an arrival allowance once you get into the UK, and there's also a departure allowance when you have to return back to your country. And so it's just everything to ensure that you're not spending to be able to study in the UK. And of course, for people who also require tuberculosis test as well, even though you have to cover it yourself in your country, it's being refunded when you get to the UK. So it's 100% fully funded. It's ideally, of course, what anyone would like to have, especially because it's as generous as that. And yet there's still lots of events, lots of engagement opportunities, even in the UK, and as an alumni as well when you're done. So it's a lot in one offer that, of course, covers for the fully funded.
So, what is your wrap of the entire program? Now that you've been through the application process, we've been through the master's process, and you're not just at the bumps to finish. Actually, you are just about to finish. It's close. You finish your master's. Now, what is your general view about the entire process since you began? Is it 2 years ago? Yeah, something like 2 years ago. Oh, that's far.
Yes, 2 years ago. I started the application 2 years ago, 23. It's quite a long journey, and it's one I'm really grateful for. I think I love the fact that it has really opened my mind to a lot of possibilities in terms of the networks as well, and the quality of education that it brings to you. I mean, from the UK, it's really a lot, and of course the opportunity to tour the UK. I had a lot of things on my bucket list. So it's interesting, but I haven't yet gone to everywhere I plan to. But I mean, there's still some time I haven't really able to do that. So Chevening really, it just gives you the opportunity to explore the diversity in the UK. And again, because it's a global scholarship from across 160 countries, roughly, it allows you the opportunity to also network with people from other countries, other people in your field from, I mean, other countries again. So it's really global, and of course it's an opportunity for you to become a member of that global community for a lifetime. It's been 2 years, but then it just feels like we just barely started, right? So it's something that is really engaging, and I mean, lots of opportunities to choose from. In fact, I remember one of the questions I asked in my interview was, there are lots of events in the UK, lots of things going on. I directed this question to the alumni. How are you able to manage the pressure, of course, because everybody has different academic schedules from different schools? How are you able to manage that but still make the most of networking and visiting and attending events? I mean, knowing fully well that the UK has a very rigorous academic system in terms of the master's program. So it's a lot, but then you have to be able to manage time well to be able to make the most out of it while also still paying significant attention to your studies as well. So yeah, it's a very wholesome year. I mean, I'm not done yet, but yeah, it's a very wholesome year. That it's really incredible that you can be able to achieve all that within just 1 year. So it just comes by very fast, but it's a lot. It's a lot in stock.
We usually say when somebody listens to this conversation this far, this person is really, really serious about playing. They want to put in the every effort so that at least they can make it. And sometimes I usually say, I wish I could help everybody listening to this conversation to get one. But then, what do you have to say to this prospect as your parting shot?
Right. So I would say that number one is to be yourself. Chevening doesn't want you to be like somebody. They want you to be like yourself. But you can understand Chevening, what Chevening wants, and then position yourself to meet that requirement. So I really think it is important because especially when you're going through the essay writing, it requires a lot. It requires a lot of research, and sometimes it also helps you find yourself because it is a lot as well. I mean, there's a lot of research that's required, especially in writing the career plans, future plans, which you may not have had all sorted, but they just want to see that genuineness, that credibility. And then secondly, don't just apply, don't just be a loner. Try to look out for support communities. There are lots of support communities that support people writing Chevening Scholarship. I mean, just in terms of preparing and attending mock interviews, it's important because it also helps you to network and also liaise with other people who are also applying as well. So that's something that's really important. Try to network with communities that support applicants. And then I would say research, do a lot of research, do a lot of research. And of course, start early. I started writing my essays from July and applications opened in August because of course, the questions would quickly remain the same. So I already started drafting it because I didn't want to have to rush eventually. So at least every week I'm revising my essay, I'm looking at it, I'm reviewing it. I had enough time even before the scholarship opened, and then when it opened, I continued. And so it gave me the time to review as many times as I wanted, to sleep over it and wake up and look at my essays again. I mean, and also, of course, the time to have an extra eye look at it as well. So again, that's the thing. You don't just want to be alone and with the Chevening application, join it. You should get reviews. I recommend that. I mean, it's not compulsory, but I mean, I would recommend it that you at least let one or two eyes, extra eyes, just look at your work and just proofread it and be sure that you're meeting the requirements. These things are necessary. They are necessary. It helps you as well because sometimes you could get really bothered and really depressed about writing the essays, and Chevening essays are actually few, it's just 4 essays. I mean, as at the time I was applying, I was also applying to a few other scholarships as well. And so it was a lot of essays I had to write. And it was important that, of course, there was a community, there was support available. And so I think that's really important. So starting early and, of course, being yourself and doing, of course, a lot of research really positions you to, I mean, take advantage of the opportunity as early as you can. And you can do it on your first time. I did it on my first time. You can do it as well if it's your first time looking at. Try to understand first what Chevening is looking for. That's why the website is very detailed. The Chevening website is very detailed. When I see people come to my DM and they're asking me, basic questions about Chevening, I would still direct them to the websites because there's no person who can give a better description of your of the response you're looking for rather than the student website itself. So it has a lot of information there. It has reviews from previous essays, what they are looking out to see. It has a lot. And if you spend enough time on the website as well, you would be able to give yourself an edge.
How do I connect with you? Having listened to you through this conversation, I'd love to connect with you and know more about you, what you are doing, what you may want to be in future, just for networking purposes. How can I connect with you?
I think the best bet would be through LinkedIn. Of course, my name is Victory Ojating. My name on LinkedIn is Victory Henry-Ojating. That's my name. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or send an email. My email is on my LinkedIn. And so, we could
leave the link to his LinkedIn profile in the description of this video. So please check out the description and you will find all the details you need on how you can reach Victor. Also, we will leave the link to Chevening Scholarship website in the description of the video. So if you're considering making an application, we wish you all the best and we hope we are going to have your story coming up next in the next few months. So that was Victory Henry-Ojating, and this is the Management Diary. I'm your host, Omar Joseph, and until we get to meet again in the next episode, bye-bye then.